Hi everyone, a very pleasant good evening to you, all the way from Tofino, the west coast of Canada, all the way out to St. John's, Newfoundland. Tonight we're going to talk about char fishing. These chars, of course, are very akin to trout, and the two fish we're going to speak of are two of the most famous game fishes in the world. One of them is the giant lake trout found all over the North Country. The other is the very famous square-tail, speckled trout, or brook trout, whichever you'd like to call them, that we found up to 6 and 7 pounds in northern Ontario. Once again, my name is Ted Peck. A very pleasant welcome to Tides and Trails.
From Canada, from around the world, it's time for Tides and Trails, Canada's only outdoor show. The show as big as all outdoors. Brought to you by Sportsman King Size Filter Cigarettes. Now, with close to 2 million Canadians watching, here's Ted Peck.
And a little word of introduction, shall I say, to the two trout once again. We're going to take you on two separate and distinct fishing trips in two areas of Canada. Tonight, one of them is British Columbia, far north of British Columbia, north of Central, on a revisitation of Cunningham Lake. For those of you who were with us perhaps about 2 years ago will remember the giant lake trout that can be taken in the fall by spinning from the shore. Well, we went in boats this time, and again with spinning tackle, not with trolling gear. An 8-pound test, as light as this, caught fish up as high as almost 40 pounds. And we caught lots of them. We took some very, very fine people with us, which I'll be explaining to you in a few seconds. Now, the second part of our episode tonight, we're going to take you to northern Ontario, very quite far north in Ontario, with a river that empties into Hudson's Bay called the Albany River, and we're going to fish for the speckled trout, or brook trout, or square-tail, whichever you'd like to call him, one of the game fish of the eastern part of this continent. And this particular river system has given up some of the largest speckled trout in the world, and the average size of them goes better than 3 pounds, and we took them up to almost 7 pounds in weight, and all on the fly this time. And I think you're going to enjoy the northern Ontario scenery. It's entirely different than western Canada. But first of all, we're going to take you, as I say, to good old Douglas Lodge, our friend George Davis, up at Fort St. James, just a bit north of Prince George, and we take these people into Cunningham Lake, and some of them, for the very first time, are catching large game fish. And these are the giant lake trout, which are living in this stage of their lives and in this lake in quite shallow water and can be taken by spinning tackle. And the size of the spoons that you're going to see, I think you'll be quite amazed with. Now let's go fishing in northern British Columbia first. This is the scenery all the way through the beautiful coast of BC as you go up to the area of Cunningham Lake. We flew up all the way through the Butte Inlet area, the Homathko River, up to One Eye Lake, and then on through to Cunningham Lake. Some of our visitors we saw on the way. We dropped in, and Mrs. Moose was paddling across one of the many millions of lakes and streams in the area. Lots of wildlife all the way around. This very fine gentleman in the very loud checkered shirt is Sir Francis de Gingon, and he is world famous. He's a general in the British Army, and during the Second World War had been Montgomery, Field Marshal Montgomery's aide-de-camp, and also his personal chief of staff on many of the campaigns of the Second World War. There's another moose going ashore, and all this we saw before we started to go fishing in Cunningham Lake. Cunningham Lake is also famous for moose hunting in the fall. Taking off on one of the large river-type boats. This individual here, a very fine sportsman, is Mr. Jack Devlin, who is the president of the sportsman people here in Canada. And the fellow with the peaked cap is Mr. Larry Dampier, who is the general manager of one of the West Coast newspapers. And here's Jack with quite a large fish on, as well as Sir Francis, both at the same time. Some people are using single action reels, some are using light spinning reels. And this will give you an idea of the average size of these lake trout, or lake char, or whatever you'd like to call them. They go an average of about 18 to 20 pounds. And they're taken on light spinning gear. We gave Sir Francis one of the lightest outfits that I own, a little about 2 1/4 ounce spinning rod and only about 80 feet of line on it, of 8-pound test. We made him go all over the lake with it, and it took him, on one of his fish, about a 22-pounder, it took him an hour and a half to bring to net. There's the large spoons we were using, these great Norwegian heavy type ones that you can cast for 100 feet, and you bring them in at a depth of about 30 or 40 feet. And these big fellows are just anxious to eat almost anything in this Cunningham Lake. And Sir Francis enjoyed this tremendously. He also had the opportunity of going fly fishing with us in Carp Lake, which you've seen before, on tides and trails, where every time you take a cast with a dry or wet fly, you catch a fish of somewhere between 1 pound and 3 pounds. Here I'm releasing a 15 or 18-pound trout for Sir Francis, because after all, the limit in northern British Columbia is 3 of these fish over 20 inches in length, and they were biting on every cast. Those of you, as I say, who have been with Tides and Trails before and seen the show that we did in this particular lake in the fall, almost every cast one of these large lake trout. And there are such lakes all across northern Canada. Northern Saskatchewan has them, northern Manitoba, parts of northern Ontario, northern Quebec as well. And of course the Northwest Territories are just full of lake trout. Great Bear Lake, Great Slave Lake are famous for them. They have commercial fisheries that exist there on them. You must remember all these fish are at least 18 pounds minimum. This one was taken casting, if you please, a Pacific Coast salmon plug. We tried almost every method on these fish. Some were even taken using a live kokanee, or landlocked sockeye salmon, which could be taken fly fishing in Cunningham Lake. Larry Dampier had a particularly good time on this trip. He enjoyed very much casting for these large fish. He's trolled for them before, but certainly never casting. There's Sir Francis, a detailed study of him, a very fine sportsman, as I say, an excellent shot with his scattergun, as well as a keen sportsman. This chap here, holding up one about 35 pounds, was our pilot, Gary Borgford of the BC Airlines, and he stayed with us for a whole week. And we fished many of the lakes in the area, and the time of year was mid-June. Sir Francis still with the fish on the line he had for an hour and a half. And he has fished all over the world and admitted that this was some of the finest pure sport, pure fun that he'd ever had on this large type of fish. There's one that John Barley caught, our manager, and he couldn't even fit him in the net. George Davis there hoisting him into the net. George, of course, runs the lodge on Stewart Lake where we stayed, a short distance from Cunningham Lake. Having a look at Sir Francis's fish now after the giant battle, and there's John's fish, a good 32 to 35 pounder. All taken casting or drifting, not trolling. So if any of you would like to go to Cunningham Lake, the fishing is good there from June right through until the fall. And George tells me even that you can catch them through the ice, although we tried there once one winter and were unsuccessful because we didn't know the lake well enough. Here's our catch, and I say a fishing trip once in a lifetime that one would remember, on catching giant lake trout on every cast in Cunningham Lake. Their Latin or generic name is Christovommer namicush, and they're found, as I say, in the Great Lakes. They're found everywhere, all across northern Canada, but never have I found a lake with a success ratio like this one. And we leave the lake back to the moose, which we will return again someday when we find one with large antlers. So now let's take it easy and hear all about the tobacco in famous Sportsman cigarettes. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take you on a fishing trip in northern Ontario, where we started out from Fort William and Port Arthur, the twin cities at the head of the lake, and we're going to go with the Superior Airways people up to the Albany River, which is a beautiful virgin setting some 200 miles north of Fort William, and a series of lakes and widenings in lakes and beautiful streams to go fly fishing for the mighty square-tail or eastern brook trout. And here is the true, natural, native home, and they exceed 5 pounds in weight many, many times. Our host on this particular trip was Jack Cameron of the Superior Airways, and he brought along his brother Ernie, who is one of the finest fly fishermen that I've had the privilege of fishing with. And there's Ernie boarding the beaver, and we fished many of the widenings in lakes and small streams that are tributaries to the mighty Albany system, which drains into Hudson's Bay. Carrying our canoes along with us, alongside the beaver. We dropped down into some of these lakes, some of them even unnamed. Now, this particular little stream we were going to fish, there's Cornelius, one of our guides, and Noah, full-blooded Ojibwe Indians, and Ernie once again. The name of this particular stream is the Shabasquaya, which is Ojibwe, and we meet Jack Cameron here raising his hat and setting up the fly rods. A lot of us using very light fly rods in this time, and the eastern brook trout or square-tail is sought after all over the world, particularly these large, near record-sized ones. And in the same waters with the square-tail are, of course, the northern pike and the walleye, or pickerel, if you like to call him that, and even in some areas, the muskellunge. But in the same water also exist these beautiful speckled trout. We fish for them mostly with wet flies. There's a Polar Royal Coachman that I use. Lots of different fly patterns will work on them. I find that in the east, and in northern Ontario especially here, that bright-colored patterns work better than the plain or dull-colored ones that we use for Pacific Coast types of trout. And one of the keys to successful fishing in northern Ontario here is to have a good guide who knows how to quietly sneak down a stream such as this one and fly fish for the speckled trout. Beautiful clear water, cold temperature, and the fighting qualities of the native speckled trout are truly brought out by these conditions. The season usually closes on September the 15th, so most of your fishing must be done in the spring and summer months. And here I've hooked one, a beautiful specimen of a little better than 4 pounds, and when you're using very, very fine 2 and 3X tippet on your fly leaders, this is quite a sport. And those of you who remember all the way back years and years ago when the sportsman people first came out with sportsman cigarettes, this is the type of fish that they have on their package, the eastern brook trout. And a lot of the flies that are seen on the backs of the sportsman packages are the ones that will catch these speckled trout. But look at the size of this fellow, and he too, just like the big lake trout we showed you in the first part of our episode tonight, are char. They're not really true trout. They are one order of life lower than true trouts. In Canada we have several true trouts and the Atlantic salmon, but this fellow here, the speckled trout, is actually a misnomer. He's a char, much the same as the Arctic char, the lake trout, the Dolly Varden, and various other game fishes of Canada. And that fellow just about 4 pounds, maybe a little bit over. They're very heavy, deeply built fish. As I was telling you earlier, Ernie Cameron, who actually is a sportsman for many, many years, is an excellent fly fisherman. Takes good care of his equipment, releases all the fish he doesn't want, and plays each one as the professional that he is. Ernie lives in Calgary now. He used to live with his brother Jack and the Cameron family in Fort William. and getting back to the technique of fly fishing once again, particularly for eastern brook trout. It's one of those things that you can't learn overnight. A lot of areas in Canada, all the way from St. John's, Newfoundland, right out to Victoria in British Columbia, have fly fishing schools. And when we show you fly fishing on tides and trails, I wish we could take the trouble to show you each particular step. And so we've even got cameraman Bill interested in fly fishing. He's brought himself a rod and reel and a line and the whole outfit now. But I would suggest to all of you, and particularly to the mothers and fathers of youngsters, that you want to get them started in fly fishing as early as possible, because each person develops a style, just as you do when you learn to write. And you must learn the proper way, up, down, and so on. These are taught in schools all across Canada, and most of them are free. A lot of the school boards have night classes, which are very, very nominal in their charge. But a lot of areas have absolutely free classes. I can recommend one particular one in Vancouver that's run each summer by the Vancouver Angling and Game Association, one of our conservation clubs. And the Winnipeg has one the same, the Winnipeg Game and Fish. Lots of places learn fly fishing, teach fly fishing to children at an early age. And I would suggest to you, get your youngsters into learning fly fishing, and they'll have more fun the rest of their lives than the people who just casually pick up spinning or trolling or other methods of catching fish. To catch one fish on the fly is worth about 50 any other way. Let's go back now to show you some really good fly fishing in northern Ontario. This is where Ernie, and Ernie's a great curler, incidentally, too. That shows you what sort of a sportsman he really is. He's catching one here better than 5 pounds. Now, we didn't have a set of scales, but being fishermen and a bit of a prevarication type of person, and both Ernie and I would say this fish went better than 5 pounds. Now, he was hoping for a 7-pounder to have mounted on his wall. A few shows back, last year, we showed you one just about 7 pounds mounted by Ken Hawkins in Winnipeg. And these fish certainly are well worth mounting. Here's another case of someday we'll be bringing you color television to show you the violent, brilliant hues of the speckled trout, the blue color in them around the spots, the reds, and the deep orange and red on the fins with the white tips. And to catch one of these, particularly with a fly that you've tied yourself, is a prize that some people spend thousands of dollars on and come from all over the world to fish in this Albany system and to fish in the other areas of northern Quebec and northern Ontario. Beautiful, a male speckled trout, certainly better than 5 pounds in weight. And Ernie Cameron of Calgary there came all the way out to northern Ontario just to catch one such fish, which he did here in the Shabasquaya system, fishing with his brother, Jack, and myself of the Superior Airways people. Weather is quite changeable in northern Ontario in the spring. And also the fishing is quite varied. Here's a little northern pike, or what we call a hammer handle, being taken on a fly once again. At the end of our day's trip there with the 2 fish, we fished all day for those 2 fish. It shows you that the fishing is not plentiful that size. We released many of the smaller ones around a pound. But we were after these big, full-grown, what they call locally in the Lakehead area, specks, or speckled trout. And these same fish, as I was saying, are stocked all over Canada. They're very good in other waters than their own, but they don't fight as hard as they do in their native northern Ontario streams. Of course, a good fishing trip like this would not be complete without eating fresh trout right on the spot. And prepared by the native Ojibwe Indians, Noah and Cornelius here, and cooked over an open fire, just delicious. The speckled trout has the deep red flesh, and these boys certainly know how to handle their filleting knives and prepare them to perfection. We're going to show you not only the preparation here of the fish for the noon meal. But now some excellent fishing in the rapids. And here again, you must have a good guide and know the area, have the guide know the area and how to work those rapids for the fish. You're fly fishing right in the rapids under most circumstances. And this particular meal consisted of 3 types of fish. Also in the same area are large whitefish living in the rivers that go up to 5 and 6 pounds. And we took several of them around 3 pounds on the fly once again. And whitefish, speckled trout, and a bit of pike too, the walleyed pike, or what is called pickerel in the east. And the 3 types of fish were delicious as a lunch. This little table was built by the people, the trappers in the area, and also by the people that work indirectly with Jack Cameron of the Superior people, and Minnemisca Lodge, where we had the privilege of staying for a week. The whole countryside is birch, trees, scrub, small pine, a lot of alder, and full of small fur-bearing animals too. It's great trapping country in the wintertime. And now it's time to relax and hear all about the rich tobacco, the sportsman's cigarette. Now here, as I was saying, ladies and gentlemen, is the different types of terrain that you will find in northern Ontario. This is catching a small trout, probably 1 pound or 2 pounds. We release them here because here again is the home of the giant speckled trout once again, and this is entirely different. There's Jack Cameron using a spinning outfit, but we, both Ernie and I, were sticking strictly to fly fishing. This is a river, again a tributary of the Albany system once again, that you fish by launching your boat in a lake and then drifting down through the rapids, some of them quite violent rapids, and your guide must know where he's taking you. And you pull into the shore and fish the different reaches, runs, and pools all the way down the system, and then get picked up again in another lake probably at the bottom of the system. There are just thousands of lakes running through this entire system. And on a large map of Canada, all you will see was one strip saying Albany River. But when you're actually in the country, it is a series of widenings in the river, a series of small tributary streams, and full of fish. All kinds of fish. This one's a whitefish. I'll give you a good look at this fellow. Or is this another one of the small trout, about 2.5, maybe 3 pounds. Remember, Ernie caught one particularly nice, no, it's a trout, caught one particularly nice whitefish, and the meat in the whitefish is just as delicious as the trout. He has a style of casting there all his own. And the thing to remember here, particularly when you're learning fly fishing, is don't bring your rod too far back, or your fly will touch the water and spoil your forward cast. Having the bow position in the boat here had the advantage at this particular point in our fishing, and was out fishing me about 5 to 1. There's his whitefish, a beautiful specimen of about 3.5 pounds. No teeth, very fine, soft mouth, and he caught this on what he calls a muddler fly, which is a very common fly in the whole eastern area. The Port Arthur, Fort William district. The muddler is quite famous. Here's where I got wet going through one of the series of rapids. Here's Jack Cameron and Cornelius going down another stretch of rapids. And his guides must know what they're doing with that paddle, or it's curtains. Most of the streams aren't too deep. but they're certainly swift. And I'd suggest to any one of you that you know how to swim very, very well in this country, or else wear a life jacket. This scene here, I would suggest, typifies most of northern Ontario. Fast stream, small timber, and absolutely beautiful for fishing. Here's a very nice trout that I caught from the shore rather than from the boat. And cameraman Bill, who had just finished his lunch, came down and just caught me by accident playing it here. Another one of the cases where I was getting a little bit wet up to the knees here, forgetting about why bother with the waders in the summertime. This fellow here being better than 3 pounds. They're not quite as active a fighter as the rainbow and steelhead trouts of the far west, but they're certainly very, very strong fighters, and they'll last quite a long time. Nice 3-pound specimen. Very deep, broad fish. They say famous all over the world, speckled trout, and they're called various names, but the most common one is speckled trout. And their generic name, for those of you who are studying fish, is Salvelinus fontinalis, and in New Zealand they even call them fonties. And we're going to take you to New Zealand very, very shortly, and many other places around the world. But don't forget, we realize this is a Canadian show, and we'll show you lots more of Canada. As we always say, be a true sportsman, smoke sportsman, king-size filter cigarettes. Ted Peck wishing you all the very, very best, and tight lines, straight shooting.
Join us again next week for another Tides and Trails, Canada's only outdoor show. The show as big as all outdoors. Brought to you by Sportsman King Size Filter Cigarettes.